Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're taking a deep dive into everything new coming in the Fates Divided DLC, set to launch on March 11th. Now before we jump into this, I do have to make note that I'm currently on the pre-release build of the game, so everything here will be subject to change, and if we do run into any bugs, hopefully they will get patched up before the DLC releases or soon after. As a matter of fact, if you do happen to catch any bugs or errors during this preview, please feel free to comment below and I'll report everything to the developers so they can make note of it. Now, as you might have noticed, this deep dive video is rather long, but everything should be nicely subdivided into timestamps, so please feel free to skip ahead to whatever interests you the most. And for those of you who are still here, the first thing we're going to talk about is what is new in this DLC. Now, in particular, this DLC will mainly come in two parts, the part that is locked behind a paywall and the part that's coming as the free patch on 1.7, which you will see in a few days. So the first thing that you will get as part of this paid DLC is you will get the Fates Divided added to the timeline, and this is the 200 years start. If we take a look at the map here, you'll notice that there will be 13 playable factions added in for this chapter pack starting date, and this number will depend on how many other DLCs you own. For example, if you do not own A World Betrayed, you will not be able to play as Sun Ce. If you have not downloaded Shixie's free LC, you will not be able to play as Shixie. The same goes for the Furious Wild, where we have Meng Huo, Mu Lu, and Sha Mo Ke available to be played in the year 200. And if you're wondering what happened to Zhurong, well, she's happily married to Meng Huo, and you can see her as a noteworthy character standing behind her husband, so she has already been confederated. Aside from these factions, another big selling point of the DLC is that you'll be getting the first cross-generational faction in the game, in Liu Yan and Liu Zhang's faction here in Shu. So this is Liu Zhang's start in 200. And if we look at the marks here, you can see that he is also playable in 194. But the faction leader becomes Liu Yan. And if we go to 190, it's still Liu Yan. Now this is because historically Liu Yan dies in 194, and then Liu Zhang takes over. So here they share the same faction mechanic, which is why it's called cross-generational faction, because they keep the same mechanic even as you pass on to a new leader in a later starting date. This is something new that's being added into the game. Now this faction has some interesting aspect added to them, and what we will do is we'll hop into Liu Yan's faction to make note of them after we finish up with the 200 map. For the rest of the map, you see you have the familiar factions of Liu Biao, who has quite a bit of land at the start, with Huangzu as the vassal. We won't be spending too much time analyzing the starting positions, as after all that's the purpose of our faction preview videos in the coming days, where we will take a deeper look at each of their starting positions. Ma Teng's still here in the west in this starting date. Very small amount of land, and you might notice some enemies to his north, and I wonder who they might be at this time. And then the bandit factions are still here. Zhang Yan has one small county in the north, surrounded by fierce enemy of Yuan Shao and the rest of his vassals. And Zheng Jiang also finds herself in a very tough situation, surrounded by Liu Bei and Cao Cao, who might be enemies with each other, but they definitely agree on the need to wipe out Zheng Jiang here. And Gongdu are also playable in this DLC, as the last remnants of Yellow Turban who actually allied himself with Liu Bei and Yuan Shao during the Battle of Guandu to harass the flanks of Cao Cao's forces. So you do get to play as Yellow Turban, assuming you have the Yellow Turban DLC, which was released as part of the launch package. So that's all the new factions for this time period, and this is the setup that you'll be dealing with in the 200 start. So back to the faction that is completely new and locked behind this DLC, Liu Zhang and Liu Yan's faction. So it's probably more interesting to start by looking at Liu Yan's faction in 190, You might notice that Fa Zheng does not start with you at this time, and that's probably because Fa Zheng might be a little too young at this time. He does join your faction in 194 and 200. It does not mean he's not available in the game, it just means he's not given to your faction at the start, so he might join other factions from 190. But we'll start here, because it does have a lot to do with his faction mechanic, which is Aspiration and Inheritance. So let's hop into game. Alrighty, so as we load into Liu Yan start, we're going to ignore everything here. After all, this is not a faction preview, we'll do that when we do it for Liu Yan's faction. So the first thing we might note is that we start out in Shu, which would make a lot of historical sense, since Liu Yan was the one who proposed the governorship system to Emperor Liu Hong in 188 and asked to become the first governor of the Yi province, which is what this area represents. So we find him here, and the main thing we have to make note of is his faction unique mechanic, Aspiration. Now in this menu, you'll see three things that you need to make note of. First, how many aspiration points you have. Then you have a list of tasks and trade-off as means to gain more aspiration points. And finally, once you have those points, you can spend them on your heir once they inherit your faction. Now your heir does not have to be Liu Zhang. If you can find a better heir to use your aspiration points, feel free to change the character. But what happens here is, as the leader or the father, you work hard to gain aspiration points. And once you have stashed enough points, you pass on the faction to your heir. You don't have to die. You can voluntarily step down and pass the faction on to your heir. And once it's passed on, you can no longer gain aspiration points, but you can spend them. You can spend them on inheritance reward. You can see that each of these actions have a set cost in terms of aspiration. Don't worry if I'm going through these too fast, we'll slow down and show you each one very soon. I just want you guys to know the general mechanics. So, as Liu Yan here, you have set dates of when you can pass on the inheritance. In the first period, between 190 and 194, this would be the historical period, you can pass on to your heir at the end of the period. So once you hit 194, the game will actually give you a one-turn warning, telling you that next turn you have a chance to inherit the faction. So at the start of 194, you can choose to pass it on. And once you pass it on, during this period, it's called timely inheritance. You'll pass on these bonuses to your faction and your heir. So you can see that your heir will get resolve points, will get authority points, your faction will get faction-wide satisfaction, your heir will get some melee evasion, their army will get campaign movement range, Dongzhou Bing marksmen and defenders. The faction unique units will have increased recruitment slots. So this is a faction unique mechanic where your units have a limited amount of recruitment. And the earlier you pass it on, the more of these units you can have. And you can also give a huge boost of experience to your heir. Current heir does not have to be Liu Zhang, I repeat. And you get one additional trade agreement. So the idea here is, the earlier you pass it on, the less time you have to gain aspiration points, but the better bonuses you give to your heir. If we move on to the next time slot between 195 and 198, the ahistorical one already, because Liu Yan's supposed to be dead in 194, you still get some nice bonuses, but you can see one penalty has become apparent. You get character salary increase faction-wide 10%. Now perhaps this is a okay trade-off if you can gain a lot more aspiration points during those 3 extra years that you gain here, or technically 4 extra years from 194 to 198. Maybe it's worth it because some of the inheritance bonuses are quite powerful. Or you can delay it to 200, and you can see at this point why inherit at all, because your heir is going to get hit with minus 10 points to all attributes, your whole faction will lose 10 points of satisfaction, plus 25% character salary, minus 10 points of public order, and only 2 units each of your unique faction units. And if you drag it on beyond 101, forgotten inheritance. Minus 20 to all attributes, minus 20 to satisfaction, 35% character salary, punishment, 15 points of public order, and minus 15% income from all sources. really painful penalties. So ideally, you want to get things done here, or maybe here. But if you drag it out anymore, it's just basically punishment on punishment. So how do we plan this out? Well, the fastest way to gain aspiration, which goes from 0 to 10k, quite a bit of aspiration can be saved up, is to do trade-offs. So trade-offs are things that you decide to inflict on yourself in order to gain aspiration. So the first one here, public checkpoints. You lose public order and you gain aspiration. Now the levels here works like this. Once I activate it, I'm on level 1. The more turns this is activated, the higher level it goes. So if I have this activated starting on turn 1 here and it goes a couple turns, it'll go to level 2 and so forth, and I'll gain more aspiration. But my punishment becomes heavier. You can see that the next trade-off level is in 5 turns. So this is one trade-off. Well, if I like pain, I can pick another trade-off. Smith education. Increase upkeep for all units, but increase aspiration. So let's click that one as well. And then you can see the next one, increase character salary. The next one, minus trade influence. The next one, minus military supply. This one's probably the easiest one to deal with in my opinion. Minus income from all sources, very painful. And +1 construction time, also very painful. Minus 10 points of satisfaction. So if you have all 8 of these checked, you're gaining 40 aspiration per turn for the first year, and then 80 the second year, and then a whopping 160 a turn for the third year, and the fourth year, and the fifth year. No, it will only be 4 years, because at the start of 194 you have to do the inheritance. So technically you can max this out, for not even exactly 4 years, because you start out in the harvest season, but you don't have that many years. So you're not going to hit the max 10k even if you turn all of these on at the beginning of the game. And of course, you have to play the game with these punishments active. So it's going to be quite challenging. Now, is aspiration worth it? Well, it depends on how many of the tasks you finish. Because just because you have points doesn't mean you can use the inheritance action. Because each action is locked behind a task. So if I don't do any of the task, I can't use any of the inheritance abilities. So for example, my heir must win 3 duels. If he does that, then I get recruitment posters. So let's take a look. Recruitment posters is right here. Once this becomes active, I can pay 80 aspiration point to use it. It will last 20 turns and give my local county 40% replenishment rate. So this means the heir's local county, or your leader's local county, once he becomes leader. So wherever he is, that county gets plus 40% replenishment rate, or basically his army has 40% replenishment rate and any other allied army in the county. Pretty powerful, and it would require you to work on it by getting that 3 duels early on with your heir. Have your heir level up. That's a simple one for us to get investment education, have 3 armies with maximum number of units. That might be difficult because you have to combine that with increased upkeep, increased character salary. So it's going to be pricey, but you just need to have this for 1 turn because you check this at the start of turn. So perhaps you just want to spend the recruitment money and then get rid of the armies afterward. There's probably ways to get these out without having to spend too much money. Experience general, have your heir lead and complete 5 battles, have a city of level 6 or higher, know of 15 living factions, own 10 regions, have an income per turn higher or equal to 1,500. So this one is interesting. And I think the trade-off here is either you have to survive these and get it done, or try to get this on the first turn. Because you still want to click all these, but on the first turn of the game, you can probably sign quite a bit of trade agreements and non-aggression pacts just to get your income there. You can trade income for per turn income. Just find a way to get your income to 1,500. And once you finish all 8 of these tasks, you will unlock all 8 of these inheritance rewards. So the inheritance rewards will range from instantly leveling up a character. There is a cooldown of 20 turns, so I can't just click this 50 times and everyone's level 10 in my faction. So it's not as powerful as you think, but it's still quite useful. Then investment education. This will last 15 turns and also have a 15 turn cooldown, so you can technically have this always active if you can pay the aspiration cost. 75% character experience boost faction wide. Pretty good. Spawn exceptional auxiliary item. So one thing that player has been complaining about is the lack of ability to gain auxiliary items, and I think CA has fixed it with a couple of features in this DLC, including this one. Here you can get a silver tier auxiliary item on command, 10 turn cooldown, by using 50 points of aspiration. Now of course we know this is faction unique, but I promise you every faction will have some way of gaining auxiliary items, and we'll talk about that very soon. Then we have 35% income from all sources, local county, once again, wherever your leader is standing on. 15 turns, 15 turn cooldown, pretty good. You have 40% replenishment, which we mentioned already, minus 35% recruitment cost, local county again, which I feel like it's very strong if it's local county because you can apply this to multiple armies. Complete construction in 1 turn, local county. So if you're in a commandery, build everything, instant complete, 20 turn cooldown. Soldier's drill, increase campaign movement range and 20 points of morale. Now there is no conditions under this, so I'm assuming it's not faction wide. I'm going to assume this is only going to happen on your leader's army. So it's not bad. A sudden burst of movement is never harmful, but it's not as strong as it seems. And well, none of these seem particularly strong. The cost is not particularly high because you will save up easily a couple of thousand in aspiration points. So you can enjoy these bonuses throughout your campaign. Now the funny thing here is if you play Liu Zhang on the 200 start, and you will get 600 aspiration points. And that's 600 out of the maximum 10k. And this is CA's clever little way to make fun at Liu Zhang being a disappointment to his father. Because if we take a look at the family tree at the start of the game, Liu Zhang is Liu Yan's youngest son. You see, when Liu Yan came to the Yi province as a governor in 188, the emperor is no fool. The emperor is not going to let you bring your whole family with you. So what he did is keep most of the sons back in the capital. And most of the sons were in the government and had government official positions, so it's not like they were going to uproot themselves to move out with their dad who is going out on assignment, right? He's becoming a governor. It's not a family vacation. But he did bring Liu Mao with him. Liu Zhang stayed, Liu Fan stayed, Liu Dan stayed. Liu Zhang later on got to move to the Yi province when Liu Yan had an opportunity to ask something from the emperor, and Liu Zhang was sent as a messenger to deliver it to his father, and then he refused to let Liu Zhang go back, so he kept him. And Liu Fan here later on would plot a coup with Ma Teng to overthrow Li Jue and Guo Si, but that failed, which got both of them executed. So that's quite a hard hit to the old man, who would also suffer some burns on his back because there was a big fire in his capital city in this region. I think Mianzhu was his capital. It's not in the game. And that's where he got injured. Basically, his whole back got burned up. And at his age, he did not survive that, along with the tragedy of losing his sons. So he was forced to pass the faction on to Liu Zhang, who he never really liked, which is why his aspiration in the game is so low at the start for the 200. You only get 600 to play around with because you never got to experience the inheritance mechanic yourself. So that is the new inheritance and aspiration mechanic for Liu Zhang and Liu Yan. Now Liu Yan as a character is pretty cool. He looks amazing, by the way. These I think look like eagles or some sort of bird. But he definitely had, aspirations to become an emperor himself. When he proposed to become a governor or to implement the governmentship system into the Han dynasty structure, they had no governors before, they only had prefects. He was trying to get away from the Yellow Turban Rebellion that was brewing in the background. He thought, let me go the farthest I can go. Let me go to the Jiao province, all the way down south, over here. So he requested that, and he was granted that until he heard the court astrologer who came from the Yi province, he's a native of the Yi province, the astrologer, was talking about how the land and mountains of the Yi province was, set up to cultivate future emperors. So he, had a dream and requested to change his assignment from the Jiao province to the Yi province. So instead he came here hoping to become emperor one day. And the fire that we talked about was kind of caused by the fact that he was manufacturing these carriages that were designed for imperial, processions. And he built about 1,000 of these, and they all burned down. And it ended up burning his back and causing him to die early. Oh, he was still fairly old. As you can see, he starts the game out at 59. Opportunist ruler, 15% income from peasantry, a total of 30 points of stats. I feel like this is quite low. This basically was what his stat boost was before he became a unique general. Usually 30 points is the minimum for semi-unique background. He has the same exact background as he had before the update. So hopefully we'll see a refresh of these perhaps in the future, as it usually takes about one patch for the last batch of new characters to get an upgrade in their stats. His armor looks pretty amazing. 14 points of base armor, 16 points of cunning, 50% ammo. This is for himself. 25% range damage, also for himself. Find yourself a good bow, and you can do quite a lot of damage with Liu Yan. And in terms of unique skills, he has Rally the Troops. So as long as he's not on an elephant, this is an active ability that has 30-second duration, 50-meter range, and a 60-second cooldown after the duration ends. 10 points in morale, 10% range attack rate, 10% melee attack rate. So it's just a general buff to the units around him. Aside from that, pretty standard tree, very similar to most strategists, just a very nice skill replacement here. I think he has the same traits as before. Ambitious really wouldn't affect him too much right now. He will step down if you do play as him, so he will become a regular general under your army. You can still make him heir if you want. Technically, you could play flip-flop, have him pass the faction over to the son and then somehow get rid of the son in some devious scheme, and then you're back as leader with all the inheritance bonus and aspiration points to use for yourself. So there could be some fun ways to play with Liu Yan down the line, but he's also superstitious. You might get some random event triggers, and he's also deceitful, making him slightly better when he's a spy, but since he is your leader, it's not going to be really relevant. So that is Liu Yan's faction right here. We're not going to look at the starting characters or the land. That we'll save for a faction preview. So let's hop back and look at the two other feature factions here, and that is Cao Cao's rework and Yuan Shao's rework. Alrighty, so as we load into Cao Cao's start here in 200 actually, we'll take a look at everything new with him, as he does receive quite the overhaul. And we'll also introduce some of the other mechanics that's being overhauled in the game, namely the Faction Council. So as we skip through some of these missions, one little cool Easter egg is that our first battle is against the mighty Guan Yu, and this battle always have 100% capture rate on Guan Yu, as you are historically supposed to have Guan Yu in your army for the early stages of the Battle of Guandu. So that's a cool Easter egg to add into the game. You have a very, very big empire at the start, right? You have a lot of land. So if you're new to the game or you haven't played in a while and you're jumping into the 200 start, you probably need some time to find your bearings before you get started on turn 1. This will be quite the difficult start, and we'll try to analyze everything in the faction preview. For now, we're just interested in the new faction mechanic, which is our scheme mechanic. And it's a very cool little symbol, a little seal with Cao on top. And you can see you have lots of schemes, and some are grayed out. And if they're grayed out, don't be discouraged. It just means they're not currently available. For example, if I want to flatter the general, I need to have a character with a salary greater than 300. So as soon as I make that happen, I can do it. And that goes the same for commanderies. The reason why we can't do this is because we don't have a commandery where you have an army, but public order is below 0, right? So there's going to be some sort of public order issue, and you can use this to boost public order. Now, most schemes are not that strong. Some of them are pretty crazy, but the whole point of scheme now is not only to add some roleplay, because in Romance 3 Kingdom, you have all these little schemes that goes on to trick each other, and you have pawns here being represented as messengers that you're sending literally to a target faction to talk bad about someone, perhaps. And that's really cool. But for Cao Cao, scheme now is the essential way for you to gain credibility. If you remember before, credibility used to be this resource that grew by 5 points a turn, right? If you forgot to use it, it overflowed. So every time it goes over 75, you might want to start a proxy war or manipulate. Now it's not the case. Because credibility has gained so many new usage, and all the new usage are super strong, you can't gain for free. There are now 4 tiers. It's still between 0 and 100. Used to have 3 tiers. It used to be 0 to 25, and then 25 to 75, and then to 100, because you can't do anything in between. Now it's different. Now if you're below 50, the decay is 2 points a turn. If you're above 50, it's only 1 point a turn. So it actually encourages you to stash credibility, right? To maintain it about, above 50 or above 75. And on top of that, you also gain Imperial favor if you have high credibility, right? This is how credible you are as a character now. It's not just using that credibility as a currency. It kind of represents how credible you are, right? You're selling your credibility to gain things, whether you're manipulating someone, you are causing a proxy war, or you're using scheme. And if you notice, not all scheme cost credibility. Some scheme are designed to gain credibility, and those are incredibly important because they're the only ways you can gain credibility. So once in a while, you're going to want to use some of these that have plus credibility, because if you don't, you're going to mismanage your resource because decay is happening every turn. And ideally, you want things high. Don't worry, we'll talk about Imperial favor very, very soon. But first, let's talk about Cao Cao's unique mechanic. And so let's say I want to use this, Knowledge of the Ambitious, because I really want the 10 points. And on top of that, I give plus 15 points of satisfaction to a character, and they gain 25% extra character salary. On the surface, you might think character salary, kind of suspect, right? We're paying extra. But the base salary is 150. So normally, if you have a character who's on base salary, who is angry at you, and you need to boost their satisfaction, you have to pay at least 100 for a title. That's way more than 25%, right? That's 66%. So this is a pretty cheap way to make certain characters happy. But the requirement for this is you must have a character who has less than 10 satisfaction and desire higher core position. So usually high-level characters early on would satisfy both of these conditions, and this is a pretty easy way to boost them for the next 5 turns. And this scheme will have a 10-turn cooldown, means I can't use this scheme again for another 10 turns. And I activate it here, and instantly I will gain that 10 credibility. So let's activate it, and we're at 50. And you see here, this is a pawn. A pawn has been used to activate a scheme. And the number of pawns you have will always be the same as the number of spies you have. They're not the same person. Using a pawn or using a spy will not eliminate the option for the other task, right? You will have 4 total spies. You can spy on 4 factions, or however many factions you can send out 4 spies. You can send out 4 pawns. You can do all 4 at the same time. You can send out 8 members, right? Pawns are not spies. But the number of pawns you have will always equal the total number of spies you can host. So the more spy you have, the more pawns you have, therefore the more schemes you can have at one time. So you can work out the cooldown so that you can constantly gain stuff and scheme around. And some of the schemes might not be active right now. Like for example, right now we have nothing that's active from the army. And you might be thinking, how do I keep track of everything? Like there's no way I can remember what conditions for each scheme are and when I can use them. Well, let me show you guys something pretty cool. So this is Cao Cao's starting army. We fight Guan Yu. We said that this would be, a free fight, that we get 100% capture chance, and we'll show that. You see that 100% here because the base value is artificially, increased to 226%. Guan Yu is not running away from us. And we'll just delegate this one to save some time. You can fight it. He has very low morale. You have a trebuchet, just pound them. And we won the fight. We lost Imperial favor. We'll talk about this very soon. Just remember we lost Imperial favor here. Guan Yu is captured. He will always work for you here. This is definitely pre-programmed. So let's invite him over. And we'll take some more money. We got 1,000 for the first mission. Got some experience for winning. Now we want to attack Liu Bei City. Notice this symbol here. This means we can scheme against this target, this city. And we can, it doesn't bounce you to the scheme, which would be nice, but it does tell you there's a scheme. And if we look at Commandery, you can see one of them's active, and this says you can target, scheme target Liu Bei. The requirement is you have an army standing in neutral or enemy counting. So in this case, we just moved in, so now it's active. We can use the army to slow down their construction time. Now for some of these against AI, it feels kind of pointless, but if you end up playing a co-op campaign, you can really mess with people. And the AI Cao Cao can use these against you. So if you're not playing as Cao Cao in your campaign, he might be a very good target to kill off completely early on. Because before, Cao Cao was always this AI faction that you want to do that anyways, because if he survives, he will just throw proxy wars at you or scheme against you in the background, because Cao Cao is a very robust AI. And now, with schemes, he becomes even more dangerous, right? Army walks into your territory, start the wolf who provokes the chickens, and +2 construction time commandery wide for you the next 10 turns. You don't want that. We're not going to activate this. This is not a good one. This is not what I want to show you. What I want to show you is I want to attack Xiapi. I can't reach. Guess what? All of a sudden I have a scheme on the army. See, this pops up. This is very nice. I don't know why this one doesn't. Oh no, it does. I just didn't see it. So this is a very good UI, right? It tells you what you can do. So for us, we can do the hawk and tiger maneuver now. And the reason why we can do it now and not before is because we must have a force you own that is below 10% movement point. So now we have 0 movement point. What we can do is we gain a sudden burst of 50% campaign movement range, but we'll become fatigued in the battle. We'll be winded. And you can see which army fits the requirement. And this also gives us 15 points of credibility. So you can use this now. Or, maybe you don't want to use it, because if you assess the, situation, maybe elsewhere might need it more, but you can see the scheme will pop up everywhere and it'll tell you what you will gain here. In this case, 15 points of credibility. So it's very neat. And the schemes vary in ability. We'll take a look at most of them now. These character ones are mainly targeting, foreign faction, in particularly a character in a foreign faction. So you have to pick, which faction and which character, and then their redeployment cost of that character goes up. So pretty limited, but let's say you just knocked out an enemy general who has a very strong retinue and you don't want to see them again on the map. Then you smash this onto that faction. Let's say we just beat, Yuan Shao's or Liu Bei's army, and then they have maybe Lady Mi in the bench. We know that, right? It's selectable. And we don't want to see them on the field. So we use this. And that way that character becomes more expensive and the AI might not recruit them. To me, the best use of this is I can find who's on whose bench very, very easily, which is really good for stealing characters when you're spying. So that's a pretty cool thing I think that's added into the game for Cao Cao's faction. You can also increase a certain character's recruitment cost for their retinue. You can increase their retinue upkeep cost. You can decrease their satisfaction. So this is an extension of perhaps some spying mechanic. You can force someone to become a turncoat, right? You can't do this to everyone, right? You can see that there's limitations to this. And I suspect this might have something to do with characters who are willing to become turncoats in the first place, or could potentially spy for you. That's why it's rather limited, right? We saw huge list over here, but when we come down to satisfaction drop, it's not everyone. So maybe try to experiment with this, with how you spy, and you can have an easier time stealing characters that way. Gift of Honor, you kind of bribe the enemy general and they want to get paid more, so they end up costing their faction more. Flatter generals for our own general. Once our own general reaches greater than 300 salary, we get this option to lower their retinue upkeep costs, but also lose population in the local commandery. Basically, perhaps draining the wealth of the local populace to make the general happy and all the troop would be cheaper. And we already used Knowledge of the Ambitious, increased satisfaction for the character salary slot, and it's on cooldown. You can see the little stamp. That's a little seal. It's pretty cool. And then for factions, we can target certain factions, dealing with spies, diplomatic relationship boost. This one, in my opinion, looks quite powerful. 50 points, it's quite a lot. And then Children in Hand is dropping the points. You can also drop a faction's food. This one also feels kind of fun, especially before you offer them some sort of diplomatic deal where you might want to use your high food currency, because you do start out in a high food area, you gain some favorable trades. You can also improve diplomatic relationship with all faction. I think this one you grab right away, right? Basically everyone like us. And then you go in on your turn 1 to do all your trades, and you get better deals during that trade. And you get 10 points of credibility on top of that. Only a turn cooldown. I think this one's like one you would spam all the time. And then minus 25% trade influence for a certain faction, enemy faction, as long as you know another faction that has trade agreement with someone else. It's not available this turn because no one has trade agreements on turn 1. And then the current season is not spring. You unlock a reform instantly. So every 20 turn, remember to come here and do this, because not only is this good, it's also plus 20 credibility. So there's a bunch of the +1 with really good effects, long cooldowns, but ones you need to remember to do once in a while. Commanderies, we already saw the utilization on enemy, where you increase their construction time. You can improve your public order if you have one that's below 0 and you still have an army there. Pretty much the requirements, you have to have an army present there to use the action, because it's realistic, right? You have an army there, you send out a pawn to do some action. Here you're dropping public order, here you're dropping population, here you're dropping their reserve to 0 basically. Well, I guess you could have over 100 reserve, right? If you build the grain storage, you can have over 100, but it's rare, and that way you can really drop them to 0. It says the reserve must be above 20 for you to use this one, which, yeah, that kind of makes sense, or else there's really no point to use this one. And then you have increased reserve, where reserves are decreasing. So technically this would be when you're getting sieged. You give them a boost of reserve so you can sustain the siege longer. Minus 20 faction support, and that's the commandery usage. Army, we already saw the option for the 50% movement. When near, appear far. Famous line from Art of War, dropping the morale of the enemy. Neutral or enemy army within your territory or within the same county as one of your forces. So you just have to be present next to them, whether they're in your territory or your force is next to their force. Pretty big morale hit, right? 20 points, add a night battle for another 15. Minus 35, that's a lot to handle. Most armies will rout. And then you have decreased diplomatic relationship, besieged by an enemy where the balance of power is half filled in their favor. So basically, they're favored in your defensive side. You can damage the diplomatic relationships and also hurt their melee evasion. You can get increased ammo and extra supplies if you have an army that is below 25 military supplies. So this is an interesting one because it's also increased 10 credibility. I was thinking about this when I first saw this. Wouldn't it be useful to just subdivide your army and then rejoin them on the same turn before you enter into a siege? So you artificially drop the military supplies below 25. and then you activate this because you get 25% ammo before a siege. So maybe your siege weapon suddenly has 25% extra ammo before a fight. I feel like that would be pretty strong. And it's only 7-turn cooldown, and you get 10 credibility. So it's a pretty useful skill to use. And the condition is pretty easy to create, right? By just dividing your army and then rejoining them. And then this one is minus 100% charge bonus for all units, right? The army ones are crazy. A neutral or enemy army within your territory or within the same county is 1 through 4. So this one's easy, right? This is when far appear near, right? The 2 lines of the art of war. So in this case, we're not dropping morale. We're just straight up disabling their charging. Faced against cavalry units, use this, and they become useless. Pretty strong. Only 10-turn cooldown, and it lasts 5 turns. So I think this is incredibly strong. Release the Damn River. Minus 25% melee damage. So I think this is a reference to either the Siege of Xiapi, where Cao Cao flooded Lü Bu, or a reference to Fan Castle when Guan Yu flooded Yujin. Probably the former, where Cao Cao was using it. But this does happen. It does demoralize you when you are, waist high in water and you lose 25% melee damage. Changing of the seasons, you force the enemy in your territory, neutral or enemy army, to lose 50% campaign movement range for 3 turns. Time to catch those armies that are just running around in your territory. Pretty cool. So that's schemes for Cao Cao. So if you want more schemes, get more pawns. If you want more pawns, get more spies. And we'll take a look at how to get more spies very soon. We'll save that for when we take a look at Yuan Shao's faction. But first, we talked about Imperial Intrigue. And this is something that's best looked at when we're looking at Cao Cao. So here you can see that Cao Cao started out the game holding Emperor Liu Xie. Now, let's not call him Emperor Xian, right? Xian's a temple name. You get that name after you're dead, right? When you're going to the temple. Your body is going to the temple. So let's not refer to him as that, Emperor Liu Xie. He is a character in the game now. You will not see him in your court because he will not be playable until you decide to pass the faction to him. And the only time you can pass the faction to him is when you reach, Emperor, right? When you reach the rank. Once you hit King, 3 Kingdoms starts, you have the Emperor seat, you are asked, do you want to restore the Han? And what happens when you restore the Han, assuming you need to have the Emperor at the time, right? You can't just restore the Han when you don't have the Emperor, is that your leader, Cao Cao in this case, will step down. Emperor Liu Xie will become your new faction leader. He will become a playable character, but a non-deployable playable character. Just like his dad, you cannot deploy him on the battlefield. But he will get a special treatment. You will get a special skill tree for him, and those skills will be more relevant for being a leader, since that's the only thing he can be. He will come of age in 197. If you notice in our previous look at Liu Yan's faction, this was grayed out because in the 190 start, he's not of age yet. So you can't see the Imperial Intrigue. He has no opinions of you. Once he comes of age, he has an opinion of everyone, and that's called the Imperial Favor. So if we click open that, you can see how the Emperor feels about every Han faction on the map. You have to be a Han faction. So who are Han, who's not Han? Well, Southern tribes are not Han, Yellow Turbans are not Han, Bandits are not Han. So far in the game, that's the only subcultures that are not Han. Everyone else automatically Han faction. Later on, if we get some sort of expansion into the north and nomadic tribes become a thing, then those will not be Han either. But right now, everyone who's not a bandit, who's not Yellow Turban, and who's not Nanman are basically Han factions. And everyone has some sort of Imperial favor. It's a point system that goes from 0 to 100. And there's subdivided bars here. I think there are 10 of them. I think every 10 point is a bar. And with each 10 points, you get better bonuses. When you're at 90 to 100, you get 10 points of satisfaction faction-wide, 20 points of diplomatic relationship with all Han factions, and minus 10% corruption reduction faction-wide. Really good bonuses. So, it encourages you to be in the Emperor's favor. And this is awesome. This is something I think the community asked for a long time, to make the Han faction and the Han Emperor relevant, because that's what made Cao Cao so strong historically. And they really hit the point here. So we are the Imperial Protectorate, so we can do extra things that other factions can't. But first, let's talk about what everyone can do. Well, everyone can be a good boy, and what you need to do to gain points and Emperor favor is manage your land correctly. So no more cheesing for rebellions, because you need high public order and a food surplus for the Emperor to like you, right? So food surplus here and the high public order will give us 3 points a turn of favor with him. And we'll also gain 3 credibility points. That's because of our faction unique credibility. It also has an integrated, point system with his faction unique resource, because he starts out with the Emperor in most of the starts. So that's something extra for you. And the rank of your faction will also determine your faction leader. So his level, I think. So Cao Cao is level 6 at the start of this. I don't actually know. 6, right? I remember correctly. So because you're level 6, you'll get that amount of points. Right, so that kind of plays all together into getting 16 points a turn. Feels like a lot, right? But the problem here is every time we fight another Han faction, you saw us fight, Liu Bei Guan Yu's army, we lost a couple points. And if we use this maneuver and, we gain movement and we take a city, which we can just delegate here, you'll see that we'll lose more points. Right, because we're fighting Han settlements. 3 points lost here. And if you want to loot and occupy, another 10 points. If you want to sack and withdraw, 15 points. Right, so now there's an imperial cost to your actions against Han factions. But of course, if you're fighting, non-Han faction territory or non-Han subculture units, then the imperial favor wouldn't really hurt you. So occupy, once again, becomes a really good choice. Alright, so back to the mechanics here. So how else might you maintain it other than these passive numbers, and what other options you have with using it? Well, you don't want to be down here, right? If there's a bonus, there are punishments if you drop below 50. You can use points to gain points, or you can use points to make someone else lose points, right? Kind of confusing here. Everything requires you to use some points, but a 5-point investment might net you 15 points. Right? Because you don't necessarily have to use it on yourself. Like you would think you would want to use it on yourself. But maybe I want to team up and make someone really favorable. Now, why would you do that, right? Well, the thing is, the Emperor is not going to run away randomly now. The Emperor is going to run away if your faction drops, assuming you're holding the Emperor, and someone else has higher Imperial favor than you. So perhaps if you are not playing as Cao Cao, but you don't want to see Cao Cao with the Emperor, and you see that Liu Bei has 70 already. So maybe I invest my points, assuming let's say I'm Yuan Shao, to drop Cao Cao's points, and then use my points to increase Liu Bei's points. I can get the Emperor to escape and run to Liu Bei, thus weakening Cao Cao's power. Of course, ideally, you might want to do that investment on yourself. But maybe for co-op games, or maybe if your point's just too low and it's not possible, maybe that's an alternative way you might do it to get, the Emperor to leave. And you can also call someone the enemy of the Han. Now this would be very costly to do, and we can't confirm because they must be below 51 points. So you can see 50 is a big threshold. But let's say Yuan Xi, poor guy all the way up north, did nothing wrong. We can just say he's an enemy of the Han. So this is what made Cao Cao incredibly powerful historically, right? Because let's say Cao Cao wants to attack Liu Biao. First, we would decrease his favor to below 50, and then we tell the whole world he's the enemy of the Han. And the thing is, it would just influence diplomatic relationship for him and all the other Han factions, and basically everyone has to heed your call to fight them. It's very important to maintain this number. And you can see that once in a while, the Emperor will also give you missions to do to improve his favor. So there's a lot of mechanics here for you to use this for. And if you have the Emperor, the really cool thing that sets you apart, because all those things everyone can do, is that in diplomacy, let's say I'm talking to Yuan Shao doesn't want to talk to me because we're at war. Let's say we're talking to Sun Ce. One thing that's not right now that I hope they fix, which I already told them, is that Sun Ce once again still has the Imperial Seal, which is a bummer. We should have it, right? What happened was Sun Ce gave the seal to Yuan Shu. Yuan Shu died to Liu Bei and Cao Cao, and after Yuan Shu died, the seal went to Cao Cao because the emperor was there. So technically the emperor should have it, or either no one have it or we have it. That both scenario makes sense. But let's say we want the seal, very expensive item. Under diplomatic treatises, the person with the emperor can issue an imperial decree. Cost 25, it's expensive, but you can use the emperor to write this decree and use it in diplomacy. Huge numbers, right? The numbers will change a little bit depending on your military strength, but overall, huge numbers for diplomacy. And we can use that to get things we want. And another thing we can do for Cao Cao only is credibility is now tradable. Every point of credibility is worth 0.1 in diplomacy. So at 7.5 or 75, we get 7.5. So there's a lot of things you can do with credibility now. It's not easy to gain because it's not free 5 points a turn, but there's more use for it now. You can still do the same stuff as before. You can still proxy war. You can still manipulate. Both are things you can do. You can't manipulate with other things around. But manipulate also becomes kind of pointless because there's a lot of schemes that kind of do the same thing and it's cheaper, right? There's a cooldown and there's no cooldown manipulate, but you're just not going to have that much credibility to work with. So this is everything new that's added to Cao Cao's faction in terms of scheming, in terms of the fact that you start out with the emperor. So we're going to show that. And before we move on, we'll show something that is changed for every faction. And that is the faction council. So here is the brand new faction council system in the game. Previously, if you remember correctly, the 5 government positions you gain before you become an emperor will give you something called faction council missions every year. Pretty much you click a button, each of the generals will give you a mission, and each of the reward is satisfaction for that general's class and some special reward that's related to that general's class. So like, for example, strategists will give you some bonus commerce percentage and so forth. Now it's very different. So you still have 5 generals that you can put on the council. The 5 members have changed. It used to be Chancellor, Grand Commandant, Grand Excellency, Grand Director, Grand Tutor. Now is Prime Minister, Grand Commandant, Grand Excellency, Grand Director, and Grand Tutor. Chancellor is no longer part of your faction council. I think the reason they did this is for balancing, because you get this position unlocked when you become second Marquis, so very early on, whereas the next rank up gets you these 2, and then the next rank up gets you these 2, and then Duke gets you Prime Minister. So now they're trying to delay when you have your faction council unlocked, right? So that's a way for them to perhaps delay the usage of the faction council, because it can be quite strong, and some of these are quite interesting. So what happens now is that at the start of the year, or whenever you want to click on this, every year they will automatically convene. You can open this up anytime during the year, and if you don't use it, then see you next year, because it'll just say faction council year 200, and each of them will present you 2 plans. And from the total of, let's say here we have 8 plans, right? Because we don't have a prime minister right now, we can put someone there and we'll get a plan added in instantly, right? So if I add someone here, we can see 2 more plans, but maximum of 10 plans. And from the 10 plans, you get to pick 1 a year. Each of them have a cost, right? It's not like I can pick one for Yu Jin here and I can pick one for Kong Rong here. Yes, they are mutually exclusive, but it's not only mutually exclusive between the 2 that's being shown, it's literally mutually exclusive between all. So you can, oh, well, that is very weird. I've been playing this wrong. So let me explain why I misunderstood this. Because you have to do this on 1 turn. So previously when I was testing this out, I would pick one, right? I would pick one that I want, and I would just click approve, right? I would just say like, I really want to add a character to my court, and I just confirm selection, right? So I got a character, which should just be a randomly generated character. Nope, not yet. Maybe next turn. I mean, we're on pre-release build. It's weird. I don't know if this is a pre-release build issue or is it something else. Because after I did that, if you go back, the session's over. You can't talk to your council until next year. So let me fast forward. So let me go back to that. All right, I reloaded a start for Cao Cao, and we're going to go back to the council. So now it seems as long as I select all of them together, I can do as many as I want. I pick this. I pick this. Each one are mutually exclusive, but like I can select multiple ones. As long as I click the confirm selection at one time, I get to activate all of them, which is nice, but also very confusing controls. We're learning new stuff together. It's a new DLC. Anyways, let's also test some other stuff out with this while we're at it, right? Because we're seeing the same ones, and I know there's ways you can actually make things refresh. So there's some real cool ones, like this one. You can use it on a certain commandery where you lower their construction time and also increase the number of things you can build for the next 5 turns. Quite powerful, right? There's some growth ones, drop enemy satisfaction, launch some raids or basically rebels. You can also sign a new trade agreement and also gain trade influence for the next 5 turns. So this can be done by yourself, right? So let's experiment here. What if we go in and I talk to Sun Ce and I ask for a trade agreement, which he's happy to agree to. I'm not going to penny pinch during a preview. And we're done with that. So what happens to his idea? Well, he switches to Zhang. So you can see that these things can change. And if we go back to here, notice the city also changed. So these things actually are not set, the second you turn to year 200, which is rather interesting. Because if you guys remember this real quick, right? Zhang Lu, add a new character to our court. Yuan Tan's faction and Shi Yi's faction, He Pu, Changyang, and then we have population growth. We have Yuan Shang. Most of these are the same, Cai Yang, and then you have Peng Cheng. I close it. I go in and I say, Guo Jia, go become my prime minister. I go back. So instantly he has missions for us, which is really nice. And then you can see this. He is changed altogether because they don't allow repeats, if you notice, right? It's not going to be like someone says trade and then someone else says trade. I haven't seen that happen yet, although it could be proven wrong. But now we have this new thing right here. A random ancillary gained. So this is going to be an option for every faction for you to get a random ancillary item. I tested a few times. Most of the time, it's silver quality. So that's quite nice. We can test it out again here because we do have money to spend. And let's see. So I want to let's test again, see if this works. This one's free, which is nice, but I want to see if we can actually get a new character because I know some of these are not working. Because there's a really cool one that I really want to work, but so far I haven't seen it work yet. And I don't know if it's because I'm on the pre-released version or is it currently bugged out. Hopefully it's because of pre-release, but it's pretty cool. I'll tell you guys very, very soon. I'll get this. And now it's Poyang and Dong. And we approve everything. And we have launched some pirate raids. We have it might be some time before he's able to answer your summon. So it's going to come in this year. So it's not broken. Good. Okay, so we got a common item there, right? Because the red hair is the last item on the random spawn and all that. So these are first turn spawns. Red hair is a guaranteed spawn. And then this is what we just acquired. So common item here, 500 for that. The new character for 500 would mean, you're getting a cheaper character than you would with 1,000. But it's going to be randomized. The building stuff is the really strong ones, right? Because now you have 2 extra build slots here, and everything is 2 turns quicker for the next 5 turns. So pretty good early game start for that. So that's going to be the new faction council. I'm going to put a word in to ask them to let us pick them separately and not all 5 at one time, or none of them, because feels bad, you know, to get locked out if I don't select all 5. But anyways, they'll be available next year, and you can get a new set of missions, and you can swap them around in the court before you select them, and you can change some of them. You can refresh a few of them. So if you want to, like, say, you know, move him over, I mean, it wouldn't be possible now, but if you want to pull them over and then refresh the rules to see if you can get new stuff, I think that's totally possible. Alrighty, and that's all we need to show with Cao Cao's faction. Let's move on to Yuan Shao's faction next. Alrighty, as we load into Yuan Shao's 200 start here, we're going to talk about his new faction rework, and that is the Armory. So over here we have the Captain's Armory, which is designed for Captain Retinues, and if you're not familiar with Captain Retinues, they're basically units you can recruit into Yuan Shao's army. So for example, he starts the game out with 1 here. It replaces a general, and it's a preset amount of troops you can have, and if we recruit, instead of recruiting characters, you can recruit captains. And here are the captains you can recruit. Sea Infantry, Lance Cavalry, Archer Captains, Jian Cavalry Captains, Jian Infantry Captains. And the units are preset, which you might feel is terrible. But before this update, what you would do with these is you will recruit them because they were cheaper. Yuan Shao used to have a 50% discount on the captains. Therefore, you spam them. Each general can have 2 of them, and you get basically very cheap armies, and you just rush factions down with massive amount of numbers. Not good units, but lots of units, very cheap, very early. It's no longer the case, because if you notice the figures, it's actually not cheap anymore, because Yuan Shao lost that skill. Yuan Shao does not start with 50% discount on Captain Retinues anymore. And you might think, the outrage, right? They buff the units and they're not cheap anymore. Well, because they buff the unit, they're not cheap anymore. So, how did they buff the unit? Well, we now have an armory system where for each of our captains, they'll be selectable on the left side here. They have an upgrade tree. Now, the first thing here is shared between all the captains and its missions. This is a very weird design, but basically it costs 0 lineage. You want to apply this right away. This is a progression system. You get missions, and the mission here is, say, achieve 100 kills with your captain in battle. And once you do that, you get minus 10% upkeep for mercenaries. Mercenaries are Captain Retinues. And once you get 300 kills, it becomes 20%. Once you get 500 kills, it becomes 30%. So this is why Yuan Shao lost his bonus. It went to these missions. And you can also have recruit Captain Retinues 3 times. You get lineage, 1-time boost of lineage. And then you can also have win 3 battles with captains in your army. And you get the recruitment discount faction-wide. So technically, now you can have 45% recruitment discount and 30% upkeep discount for all mercenaries or Captain Retinues in your armies. If you get Zhang Ba, he still has the 25% discount for both recruitment and upkeep. So he still is the most important general for you to try to steal. He starts out in Cao Cao's faction, so go find him, go get him, and your units become much stronger. Now, what about the rest of the updates, right? The armory is huge. There's a lot of bonuses. These are super strong. So you can see there's 28 of them here. You get guerrilla deployment if you pay 30 lineage points, and each of them are locked behind a set amount of lineage. So right now we are tarnished, right? This is between 0 and 1,000. If you reach certain amount of lineage, I think they're evenly divided, so I think it's like 200. Wait, no. We're currently at 40, but we're here on the bar. I vaguely remember. Okay, so it does tell you. Yeah, it's out of 300 then. This is a typo. I remember it's not out of 1,000. Right, so it's out of 300. You can see it. After 30 points, after 60 points, after 100 points, after 150 points, and after 300 points, you will unlock these tiers. Unless the resource goes to 1,000, but the bar only shows to 300, it's possible. It's possible. But saving lineage becomes very important now, because the upgrades of these higher tier ones are so much better than the lower tier ones, and you need to spend them to upgrade. So for example, if I'm in the stage of unlocking things, I might not spend the 30 for guerrilla deployment on the, the captain unit. I might not spend 30 to get 20% melee damage, or 10% melee attack rate, or 15% extra charge. These do not sound that attractive. Once we move up, passive experience boost, good, but not game changing. 7% extra range, pretty good. It's getting better, right? Caltrops, these got nerfed, by the way, but we'll talk about that when patch notes come out. And 10% armor, fire arrows, because you might not have a strategist in the whole army, so you might need this. Here's where things become very, very nice. So we're at a Steam. Only need 100 lineage for this. Replenishment in foreign land, 10%. Pretty game changing. 15 points of military supply, this is garbage. But we have morale, we have melee evasion, poison arrows, increased firing rate, increased ammo, 50%. So this is pretty big, but I would still save it up because this is a really good one, right? These diamond shaped ones are pretty game changing. Let's go check out this diamond shaped one. Whitewater. Unbelievably strong. If you don't know what Whitewater is, this is Sima Yi's unique ability. It's always on, and it does have a 4-second cooldown, 1-second duration, but if you look at the effect, plus 5 seconds of cooldown ability, means during that 1 second, I'll increase your cooldown of all your abilities by 5 seconds, and then in 4 seconds after that, I'll do it again. Means you'll never be able to use your abilities. So your Captain Retinue effectively get the ability of Sima Yi, where if your unit, the captain itself, right, you're talking about the single captain, the general replacement unit, is not under fire, morale is not broken, he's not hidden, and there's no enemy in range. So basically the effect, he's not getting attacked basically. He just stands there. No one can use their abilities. Your captain shuts down all enemy general abilities. That's insane. And this is not even top tier. This is the 4th tier. And look at this one. Becomes unbreakable. Very, very strong. And then you get increased 20% range damage, gain stock, also very, very strong to sneak towers, 25% running speed. You get enable smoke screen. So for some of these stats, they're really making up for the lack of the fact you have a general, right? If you have a general, you get mobility, all the retinue get running speed. So that's just trying to pull you on par with a regular unit. But for some of these, right, you're not going to get this from a general. You're definitely not going to get this from a general. Who knew everyone from Hebei was Sima Yi? Well, technically, Sima Yi is from Hebei, actually, now I think about it. Because Sima Yi is from Henei, I believe. But yeah, Whitewater. And then the final tier, what can we get? Plus 3 extra armies. So each of your captain retinue can help increase your army limit, thus encouraging you to spam more captain retinues. Pretty impressive. And then you can have formations unlock in case you don't have a strategist. And then you can have chance of ambush when attacking. So you become Zhang Yan as well. And this could make sense. You're in the same area in the north. Bin province get taken over by Yuan Shao eventually. So having the ability to ambush when attacking, pretty cool. So if you think about it, your captain retinues will enable more captain retinues, and they can function pretty much like a regular general army. Because you can spam 2 of these per army. You need at least 1 general. You can't just have, captain, captain, captain. You need at least 1 general. So that's why maybe that 1 general is not always a strategist, or not always a commander who's commanding the army. Therefore, you might need these things to give yourself some formations or fire arrows and so forth. And the other things you can get are range block chance and terror. All really good stuff. Especially Whitewater, very insane. Unbreakable, very insane. extra army to kind of spam more captains, and then the chance to ambush on offense. Very, very cool. And all these will be cheaper, you know, you'll get to the point where they will be cheaper for you. So pretty cool units overall. And that's the mechanic for Yuan Shao. It's much more straightforward compared to Cao Cao's mechanic. And now that I'm thinking about it, I forgot to show you guys the characters that Cao Cao has. We'll go back and do that. We'll look at all the characters together, I guess. We already had a sneak peek of Liu Yan's faction. But first, let's talk about another new mechanic that's being revamped in the game for every faction. So in this case, we are talking about faction rank ups. Right now, we are about to hit Marquise. We need 45 points. Guess how we're going to do that? We're going to talk to our son. We're going to pick Yuan Xi, because, you know, we don't like Yuan Tan. And we're just going to annex him. And we're going to have enough prestige from his land. Oh, not yet. We need to do one battle. Zhang He, go get us prestige. And we'll delegate this fight. We'll take a look at Zhang He and his weapon very soon. You lose Imperial favor. Remember, you're fighting another Han faction. We gain lineage. Lineage rank gained. Move into the next tier. More importantly, we ranked up. So this is the new rank up system in the game. This is very cool. So whenever you rank up now, you click rank up and you physically have to come to this menu and you have to click this and you get this prestige points. So instead of getting one extra spy, one extra trade agreement, one administrator, you know, one additional assignment, maybe one army every time you level up, depends on the rank, right? Each higher rank gets a little bit more stuff. Now you get prestige points every time you rank up. So in this case, when we rank up for this tier, we get 4 points. And you get to pick how to build out your faction. You can put them all on administrators, right? Which is something I might do. Or you can maybe go for all armies, which I think is not as worth because each administrator will give you extra army. Just saying. Or if you're playing as Cao Cao, maybe you want more spies because more spies means more pawns. More pawns means more schemes. And on top of that, notice these little decorations here, right? So each bar, you know, 1 administrator, 2 administrators, 3 administrator. Notice how once you hit one of these little decorations at the second one here, you gain additional bonus. So these are called milestones. So once we hit the first milestone with administrator, we get 2 administrator like we promised, and you get 5% character salary for all administrators. Once you reach the second milestone at 5 administrators, you get minus 10% salary. So pretty boring jump from the first one to the second one, but once you max out one of them, you get a very game-changing one on top, or technically game-changing in quotations, depending on which one. Some of these are really good. So here you get 10 extra food from prestige. So it's not farming food, it's not fishing food, it's not bandit food, it's prestige food. And you get 10 food extra, along with 8 administrators and 15% character salary. So now you can customize your playstyle, right? If you're going tall, you don't need that many administrators. Maybe you can save the points for something else, right? If you're playing a trade faction with a lot of vassals perhaps, look at the milestones, extra trade influence, even more trade influence, and finally you get plus diplomatic relations with all factions, 25 points. This one's actually pretty big, right? Helps you maintain those 8 trade routes. And then for assignments, you get 8 assignments, you get character salary faction-wide 25% and character experience. And I believe the character experience is the passive one, right? 5% to 25% into 50%, but then at the final tier, you get the 25% character salary, which is pretty huge because there's other ways in the reform tree for you to get 25% character salary. So altogether, you end up getting potentially close to that magic 100% mark where you can have free characters even with titles and with assignments in court, because these are added up together. So if you have 100% character salary reduction, doesn't matter what their actual cost is, it becomes 0. For spies, plus cover, plus more cover, maximum cover, right? So this is actually useful. You go above 100, so you can actually perform certain actions. And then plus 15 and also minus 10 undercover network costs for every action, which is also pretty strong. Bypasses a lot of defense and make a lot of things become more accessible. For armies, it's satisfaction for your commanding general, right? So when commanding. So if you are when commanding, you get more satisfaction. You get even more satisfaction. And finally, minus 15% upkeep for all unit, which financially speaking is pretty strong. But like I said, I'm probably going to opt away from this and go for administrators first, just because each administrator will also grant you one extra army. So technically, maybe you don't need it. But this is something you need to do. If you don't click it, you're not going to rank up. I think you can save this past a turn and you can just forget. This will show you to do it. And I need to actually say like, here, give me 4 extra administrators, confirm, and then we hit the next rank. Ranking up for Yuan Shao is very important because now Captain Retinues improve by rank. So here you see unlocks advanced Captain Retinue. At Duke, unlock advanced Captain Retinue, so they get even better. And then at King, you get elite Captain Retinue. So the whole idea here, if we hop back to Yuan Shao's army, who had the Captain Retinue slot, existing ones will not improve, right? He already recruited them. But new ones. Remember how the retinue was set up? If you don't, let me remind you, this used to be all 4 spear warriors. Now we have a couple of spear guards. The quality of the units will improve while the cost will stay relatively close. I think it's still going to be reflecting the units, but you're going to have better options because these are preset, so you don't really have a say. So once you move on to the later tiers, you're going to get some really premium units. But I think early on, the strategy is no longer spam Captain Retinues because you don't get them cheap. So what you want to do is use the ones you have to finish these missions, right? 100 kills, win battles. You can't really do the recruit one, but the recruit one's really easy to get, right? Recruit 7. Once you get them at the cheaper cost, 30% upkeep, and also 45% recruitment, once you finish those jobs, then you spam higher quality ones once you rank up, and you end up with a lot of lineage point that you saved up, and then you want to upgrade those that are premium, because this one that you recruited very early isn't going to get any better. So you still got to consider that into your gameplay. So that adds a little bit of depth, whereas otherwise I think Cao Cao's faction mechanic is much deeper than Yuan Shao's here. And that's pretty much everything we want to show in terms of unique mechanics and reworks that you're going to see in this DLC and patch. Now we're going to look at some of the new characters that are coming in this DLC. So we'll start with Yuan Shao. And the reason why we annexed Yuan Xi there is so that we can see Lady Zhen. So Lady Zhen here, she doesn't look so great in her 2D art, but I quite like her 3D art. She looks much better there. She is an elegant survivor because she does go from the Yuan clan to the Cao clan after their defeat and went on to become Cao Pi's wife. 25 points of cunning, 10 points of authority, 5 points of satisfaction faction-wide. Pretty nice bonuses. Unfortunately, she does not have any unique active ability. She has the very passive strategist tree, nothing too different here. She is dutiful, she is kind, and she is scholarly. Pretty good traits. Her armor grants her 15 base armor, 18 points of cunning, 20 satisfaction for herself, and gives encourage to the troops around her for morale boost. Nothing too crazy, but pretty good addition to the game. And the only female addition to the game this time. Then we'll take a look at Wen Chou. And here we can see that he starts out with a new unique bow, the Sequencer. So this bow has 10 points of cunning on it, enables mounted fire while moving, so you can shoot around, you can fire backwards. You get 250 range, which is pretty good, 1.1k base, 600 armor piercing. All these numbers are shown on the large unit size, by the way, and 30 range attack rate. So pretty good bow, nothing too crazy here. And then his unique armor, 70 base, so very high. Both Wen Chou and Yanao are pretty premium units. And his armor gives fatigue immunity, so we always like that, and 5% melee attack rate. So you can pretty much kite with him for a while, and then use him in melee without being fatigued. There is a small overhaul to fatigue coming in this patch, so that would be pretty interesting. Once again, you're going to have to wait till the patch note to hear about what exactly that change is. He still has the same background, which means he also had the same stat boost. I hope they fix that. I'm gonna, report that in, see if they can change the stats on them. Because if you're gonna get a unique work, you should get around 60 points of stats. You get the melee evasion for spear infantry. He did get a new unique skill. You don't start out with it, but it's in the middle here. It's called 蝎子 Roar, and you get 4 uses. So we have 2 other roars in the game. Zhang Fei with the minus 100, 1 use, and you have Sun Ce with the minus 50 roar, 2 use, and now you have Wen Chou's roar, which is 4 use. And Sidra is a mythical beast, Chinese lore, and basically you get demoralizes the enemy here. The range 35 is not big, but it's not designed to be big. Lasts only 15 seconds. It's still great. I think this is a pretty powerful ability you can use, especially since you can use it 4 times. And good addition to the game. Hamstring and Binding Fury, and also the location is really nice because this got rid of the charge defensive passive ability. You still kept both of the offensive abilities here. And aside from that, nothing else has really changed from his previous model. He does not get a unique weapon because he does get a unique bow. Going to Yan Liang, he gets a unique weapon. This is a new weapon in the game, Defense of Levity, 1.1k base and armor piercing, 20 melee attack rate. Pretty standard there. I don't think it's super high in damage. It's nicely balanced. Kind of reminds me of the Imperial Ji actually at 1.1 for both. 15 points of resolve, also similar to a Ji, even though it's a glaive art, and you get the 5% melee evasion. So stat-wise, it's a little bit confusing, right? Because I feel like this is like the Imperial Ji stat line, but then it's a glaive on a Vanguard general. So a lot of confusing things going on here, but hey, new weapon, we're gonna take it. And then his armor is 50 base, so it's a little bit lower than Wen Chou's, but 14 points of instinct, 5% speed, some extra charge bonus. Not bad, pretty decent, especially considering he got a new weapon. Everything is forgiven. Levity is his theme, right? Because that's how he got himself killed. And Frivolous is a new trait. I don't think I've seen this trait before, so it's probably designed for him, just like how they designed the Drunk trait back when A World Betrayed was launched. So this is plus 4 expertise, minus 4 resolve, 5 points of satisfaction, minus 5% character experience. So once again, both of these have small design issues, right? So I feel like this is, an expertise trait being purple, and you get expertise, lose resolve. Defensive Levity, wouldn't that be the same theme, right? He's, frivolous. Therefore, why is he getting resolve here? Just saying. He does have a new ability, and once again, it's in the middle here, which is also pretty good because you end up keeping the Roar of the Beast and the splash damage from Flame of the Phoenix. This used to be Final Push, I believe, the speed up, which is similar to what he has here. It's an active ability, Mighty Thrust. He doubles in mass, gains 50% additional charge, 10% melee armor piercing, and cause terror for 30 seconds with 6-second cooldown. It's pretty good. I think it's a great ability for him. Overall, same background, needs update, same thing as Wen Chou. They might have all the update done for all I know, because this was a very early pre-release build, and they might have the data change, just not reflected here, which could be true, because when they did the last background update in the last DLC, Furious Wild, when they made the updates, the pre-release build was not updated, but then they did the big revamp with everyone's background, and when they released, everything was good. So fingers crossed. I'll still let them know. And then we have Zhang He. I know, he used to be a Vanguard. A lot of people want to see him as a Vanguard, but what they did there is they wanted the 5 elites for Cao Cao to all be Sentinels together. So Zhang He is now a Sentinel, which I'm totally okay with. I don't think it's a crime that the 5 elites are all Sentinels, because why were they known as 5 elites? Well, later historians picked up that every time Cao Cao retreated, he sent one of these generals to be the rear guard to cut off from the enemy. Every time he was launching attack, they were the vanguard being sent out. So they're the generals he trusted the most, whether in offense or sort of defensive positions. So being a sentinel, you're kind of like that, right? You're pretty sturdy on the front line. You'll last a long time. So I send you out there first. You're totally fine. If I need you to hold a position for a long time as defensive, as the rear guard, I'm sending you out there. So I don't think it doesn't work historically. Sure, maybe you want to see more Vanguard generals in the game that's not part of the Wu faction, but tough luck. That's game design for you. But Zhang He is here. He is a sentinel. He looks amazing. The fan's a little outdated. Not outdated. A little bit early, right? You didn't have this type of fan back in Three Kingdoms with the bone structure that folds out. But we're going to look past that. He has a unique weapon called the Rule. It has a lot of armor piercing damage on it, 1.4k, not so much base, which is fine. This is a good distribution. And he has a faster attack rate of 24, 5 points resolve, and 10% additional melee evasion, which is good. It builds into a duelist role with high expertise. And then if we look at his skill tree, he starts out with his skill, which is Geographic Mastery. Now, before you think this is foresighting, it's kind of like foresighting, because you get 100% forest spotting, so basically you see through trees. But on top of that, you get charge resistance, increased speed, ignore ground type, and ignore forest penalties for everyone. Because you have infinite effective range and infinite duration. So this means Zhang He is strategic mastermind basically. Everyone in his army will get 50% more charge resistance, 10% more speed, can see through trees. They get ignore ground type and ignore forest penalty. Pretty strong actually. I think it also kind of fit him. He was a pretty good strategist in terms of commanding armies, because I think we use the strategist term too loosely here in the game, right? If you're like weak scholarly, you're a strategist, but technically a lot of these generals are strategists, right? They're not all brutes. Like maybe Yan and Eventual were brutes, but Zhang He definitely was a good commander. So this fits him. This also means you get to keep Tenacity of Steel because of placement. And he also has Temper Deflection. So the one that he lost out on is the extra armor that he gets, the 50% armor boost, which is okay, because I think this is pretty essential. He has pretty high expertise to deal with that. And his unique armor has 43, which is low, but for Sentinels, I think that's okay. 22 points of extra expertise on that. 8% more armor piercing damage, which goes great with a spear. So good design there. And then 10% extra experience. He still has his same background as with everyone else, so I don't know if it's going to get an update or not. I don't think the bonuses will change. The only thing I think will be updated will probably be the stats, because I think 30 points is just what was the semi-unique character stats, and now they should all bump up to about 60. But that's Zhang He for you. And we also have our favorite son, Yuan Shang. So, favorite son, he has some new mechanic. You can see this is updated, 60 points, because previously Yuan Shang did not have a background at all. So they had to write this in. Therefore, they got the 60 points correct. And then you get the 5% upkeep for melee cavalry, you get the +2 starting rank for all cavalry units, and then 5% from industry. There is quite a bit of cavalry. I'm going to showcase the units at the end of this preview, so we'll talk about that then. But this is a nice thing to keep in mind of. His armor gives him authority, 50 points of armor, 10% speed. Ability recharge rate, not that bad, because he still has the 2 active abilities here. That's his unique one. This is a paired ability again, so I can't say if it's going to work on launch, because most of the paired ability has not worked on launch, but they all work now. So hopefully they got it right in terms of how to code these buffs. But basically, the favored son and the unfavored son will both have this ability. And what this does is that friendly units in range with this ability will enable this ability. And once it's enabled, everything will get, both of them will get extra melee damage. So if the brothers work together on the same battlefield, and friendly units, right? It's not you had to be present on the battlefield, you had to be friendly. Then you get increased damage, increased melee charge, increased melee attack rate, increased morale for yourself. But if you don't work together, you're going to break apart. And that's a historical reflection, because even after Cao Cao historically won the Battle of Guandu, the Yuan clan didn't just collapse, right? Cao Cao still had to fight them slowly. And in the early stages, when Yuan Tan and Yuan Shang banded together, Cao Cao was losing. Cao Cao didn't beat them early on. Cao Cao had to pull his armies back. And basically he thought, if I remove myself as an external threat, the brothers will kill each other, trying to win over the entire inheritance. And that's indeed what happened. And that gave Cao Cao the opening to actually fully wipe out the Yuan clan, because Yuan Shao was huge. He launched the invasion of Guandu. Cao Cao held. Doesn't mean he won the war. He just won a battle. But that's Yuan Shao and Yuan Tan's ability. And we already looked at what changed for Yuan Shao. I don't think I can also... I can't NX back to back, so we can't see Yuan Tan here, but he's on the map, so I think we know him. Yeah, there we go, perfect. He has the same ability, we already know that. He has the old skill because it's not a new one, so didn't rewrite it. This might change. And his armor got updated. 80 armor, really, really good armor. Minus 15% retinue upkeep, plus 2 morale when attacking, and 11 authority. So I think this is on par with like Lu Bu's armor and Dong Zhuo's armor and Yuan Shao's armor. Yuan Shao's armor is also... Oh no, it's only 70. I thought it was also 80. Now we know why the son's unfavored. Spent more money than dad buying armor. But anyways, really great armor here for Yuan Tan. And also same ability to match up with his brother Yuan Shao. So that's going to do it for all the new character in Yuan Shao's faction, as well as his unique ability. It's the same here for Imperial Intrigue, and we also took a look at what happens when you rank up. So let's hop back and we'll take a look at all of Cao Cao's new characters, and then we will jump into the unit rosters and take a look at all the new units being added into the game for this one. Alrighty, so we're back with Cao Cao one more time, and we're going to take a look at his general, starting with Yu Jin. So Yu Jin gets a new weapon. There's a lot of new weapons being added and bows added into the game with this DLC, which is really nice. And we have Fear and Discipline. So as a pair of sword, the damage is not bad. 1k base, 762 armor piercing, 24 attack rate for dual weapons, not bad. 10 points of instinct, and then 5 points additional melee attack rate. So Fear and Discipline plays into the fact that historically he was very good at keeping his unit very disciplined and in check. And he's called Enforcer of the Law for this as well. His armor gives him 50 points of armor base, 12 points of expertise, 10% melee evasion, and also gives discipline, once again on theme. This is the old one still, because he had this title before, so the stats not changed. His unique abilities right here. It's very weirdly worded. It says, enable if not routing, is the defending alliance and stronger enemy. So let me translate that for you. Yu Jin can't be routing. He has to be the defending army. So his force has to be on defense. If you're attacking someone, this is not activated, but if you're getting attacked, this becomes activated. And the enemy has to be stronger than you. So on the power bar before the fight, they have to be favored. And when this condition all checks out, everyone on your side will receive the following bonuses. 25% melee evasion, 25% range block chance, 5 points of morale, but you lose 25% melee attack rate. So you might be thinking about the pros and cons of this, but technically I think it's all pros. Because if you're the defending force, you're really trying to buy time with this, and most of your damage is going to come from range. I'm assuming it's a siege defense, even open field defense, right? You're most likely using a range or cavalry to do damage if you have a strong enough front line. And everything here boosts your front line without hurting your range or your cavalry. Because your melee charge is still going to do most of the damage for the cavalry. And your range doesn't really care about melee attack rate. So I feel like it's pretty much all pros here. And it's a pretty good design on defense for you. And that also means with the placement, you keep Tenacity of Steel, which makes him a decent duelist. Then moving on, we have Cao Ren, who has finally joined the roster. Now, because the 5 elites are all sentinels, Cao Ren is no longer a sentinel, he's now a commander, which I think probably fits him better. I know all the Dynasty Warrior fans think he's this renowned defender with the big shield, but he's just good at leading units. Cao Cao trusted him, and that's really his big selling point. Yes, he did hold a lot of positions, but he also led a lot of attacks on position as well. So it's not like he was holding a shield in real life. So no complaints about being a commander. And as an added bonus for this change is that he can be a pretty good heir for you early on, because Cao Pi does start out as a kid, doesn't come of age until 203. So we're not going to actually be able to see him here. We'll see him at the unit overview very soon. But for Cao Ren here, we get a unique bow, Honor Manifested. Same attack damage as before, 1.1k base, 600 armor piercing. You don't get any cunning on this bow. Instead, you get 10% ammo for own retinue, which seems like a direct replacement, but I think I would prefer the cunning a little bit more. Let's say you get 15 points of cunning, it's close to 10%. We're at 40 and that's 7%. And if we look at who's 49, that's 11. So 10 points is roughly 4 or 5%. So we technically got about 20 point worth of stats with this bonus, which is great, but you also lost out on additional military supplies, which I know doesn't really come in handy most of the time, but still, I think adding 15 points of cunning will probably be better than this 10%, because own retinue, I think, doesn't apply to yourself sometimes, and I don't know which case this is, but it would have been safer if we just got the cunning right away. Anyways, besides Cao Ren here, I think that is it. Because Cao Pi is too young, and the only other character that we haven't shown is Fa Zheng, who we will also show when we showcase the Dongzhou Bing a bit later in the unit overview. So let's hop over to that right away. Alrighty, so we're going to end this preview with the units that are being added into this DLC, and there are a ton of them. And first off, we're starting with Cao Cao's unique units, and Cao Pi is going to be leading them. We didn't get a chance to see him in the campaign because he was still too young, and here he is with his art. Now ignore the weapons, these are assigned for him in custom battle. The armor is real. It has 46 base, 13 points of authority, and 25 satisfaction. And for those of you who are worried about his background, he still has the same political animal background, so he will still grant you that 10% corruption reduction. Now that's because it's the old ones. I don't know if they made any changes, so the stats also not going to be reflected. And in terms of his skill tree, at least in multiplayer, he has the same skill tree as a generic commander, so nothing new here. And in terms of the units, here's where things get really exciting for this DLC here, because they added quite a few historically relevant units into the game. So starting off here, we have the Qingzhou Halberds. These are Z units that are from the Qingzhou area. They're former Yellow Turbans. This used to be Cao Cao's main army group in the early days, and their look kind of reflects the fact that they used to be former Yellow Turbans. They're not heavily armored, only 25%, very low melee evasion, and no shield, but this is actually good for their design. Let me explain. So they have pretty good damage with their weapon, 23, 32, 20 attack speed, and they have very low morale, which you might think terrible, right? They're going to rout, they're going to run away. Well, what happens is they have this ability here, misplaced devotion. If their morale is low, it will become activated, and you can use this. And for 30 seconds, once you use this, it's an active ability, you will gain Unbreakable, but you also lose control of this unit, as their damage will double, but they will lose all their melee evasion, which doesn't matter, 6%, right? You lose all of that, you double your damage, you become unbreakable, you go crazy inside the enemy army for 30 seconds. So they're pretty strong by turning the tide with that. Of course, you can get them with better morale, with a better commander. Cao Pi's not bad, but they can still be improved upon. And then there's two other versions of the Qingzhou army units. So you have the Qingzhou Spear, and all of them have Unruly, right? So they might ignore your orders during battle and charge after the enemy instead of listening to you. So kind of a Yellow Turban flair, very historical here. And the Qingzhou Spear are the ones with a shield, 60% shield, still unruly, no formations on these guys. And we have a typical one-handed spear, 732 for the damage, 20 attack speed, still low morale, still same active ability, also low armor, low melee evasion. The only big difference here is shield, a little bit less damaging because it's a one-handed weapon now instead of two-hander. And then the final version, a little flare here, we have a melee infantry, a purple unit, that uses a short Z, right? You have the assault infantry, and their damage is going to reflect that. Pretty good damage for a one-handed weapon at a fast attack rate, still has the shield, 60%, slightly better armor, much better evasion, because I guess they are a purple unit, so they must have good evasion here in the game. Still low morale, still same active ability, same idea here. Pretty good charge for infantry unit. So these are definitely the strongest of the three. Then in addition to these former yellow turbans, Cao Cao is going to get 2 other cavalry units. So the one that's going to be more matching historical flair here with the tiger and leopards is going to be the tiger cubs. So the baby version of the tiger cavalry. And what they have is your typical melee cavalry setup, but they get better stats, I think. So they're very fast. Mobility is their key, while maintaining decent armor and decent evasion. Decent amount of charge for being a melee cavalry. It's not high by all means, but it's not too low. Their damage is not great, but mainly these will be your cheaper alternative to be a damage sponge, while being able to be recruited on any general type, whereas perhaps Saber Cavalry can only be recruited on commanders, since they will be faction unique. They have access to all the formations, and they also have the 50% missile resistance, good morale, pretty good stats overall. I think they're quite a mobile unit addition to Cao Cao's cavalry. And then the last unique unit that's unique to Cao Cao is one of the Northern Army units. We'll look at the Northern Army at the very end. Now, why is there a Northern Army unit unique to Cao Cao? Because Cao Cao and Yuan Shao each got a different variation of the Northern Range Cavalry. I don't know what the decision behind that is, but basically if you're playing Cao Cao and you get the Northern Army, you get this version of the cavalry unit. And if you're playing Yuan Shao, you get a different version. But this version here, the Northern Mounted Archers, have your basic bow setup. Their backup weapon is a spear, and they will have a shield which gives them a range block chance when they use that spear. So I'm assuming it's one-handed and the shield is hiding somewhere on their cloak. You can't really see it here. You see the difference once we move on to Yuan Shao's unit. But basic idea here is you have 200 range, decent ammo. We're using him on Cao Pi's retinue, not Yuan Shao. Not everyone has Yuan Shao's flag, a little bit confusing. But Cao Pi's retinue, so the cutting's not super high, but 44 is decent, very fast, good attack rate, range 200's not great, but it's not terrible. Damage is okay. You might think it's low, but there are some patch changes that I can't really talk about, so it's not bad. And then 45% range block chance due to some mysterious shield that we don't see, and 32% armor, plus some armor from the shield itself, good evasion, very low charge, and decent armor piercing damage, but low damage overall. And their main selling point is that they're these fast shooting archers and very fast moving horses. So that is going to be all the new units added to Cao Cao's roster. Of course, you'll still have your tiger and leopards. Those will be still available to you. Then let's move on to another character who we didn't get to see in the campaign map, and that is Fa Zheng over here. And he will be available to Liu Zhang and Liu Yan's faction, especially in the 194 and 200 start. He does not get any new unique weapon. These are just assigned to him on custom battle. His armor is real though. 11 base, 9 cunning, 15% range damage, and 5% character experience. So like Liu Yan, he's pretty good with a bow, so perhaps try to find a couple bows as his faction, and your general will do decent amount of damage. His main selling point is he has a very powerful unique ability called Mock, where he will mock the enemy general. It will demoralize them, it will drop their attack rate by 20%, and it will damage them for 6k over 60 seconds. And there's no limit to how many times you can use this. So it's quite a powerful damaging ability. And if you notice his health, 20k. And then if we switch over to a real strategist health, 9k. These are all on large unit size. So he has the double health buff again. So there's quite a few strategists with this double buff where they have the same health as a sentinel. And Fa Zheng is going to be one of them. So pretty nice character with some damaging ability on top that also debuff the enemy. So I think you want to use this when to affect duels if you want. It's pretty cool. So I think he will be quite the powerful strategist here in the game. And then looking at the unit, we're talking about Dongzhou Bing. So Dong means east, Zhou means province, and Bing means troops. So technically those were Qinzhou Bing, troops from the Qing province. these are troops from the Dong province. Except for Dong province don't exist, right? There's no province called Dong. So the reason why these are named Dong province is because these were refugees that flooded into the Yi province. And geographically speaking, all the province are east of the Yi province because it's the most western province in China at the time. So basically, since they come from different provinces, they're refugee from the east, so they were collectively called the Eastern Province troops. Therefore, Dongzhoubing, and we have the defenders and the marksmen. So the defenders here are your typical, spear and shield infantry, except for they carry a bow on their back. So they're hybrid units, and you can have the formation of mixed spear for them. Their bow is okay. Damage, very similar to what we saw earlier on the horseback cavalry. We're not going to talk too much about the actual damage figures. 30 points of ammo. I mean, it's on a strategist, so I'm thinking it's getting quite a bit of buff. The shield is good for 60% range block chance, and on top of that, we got okay armor. It's not very heavy, decent evasion, and the damage is very in par with one-handed spear plus a shield in terms of damage. Okay units. I think they're fun units as faction unique because of the dual weapon and the fact that they do have a shield and access to a couple formations. Then for the marksmen, these guys will have much more damage. Look at their damage figure, double the base of the defenders there, and 200 range, 60 ammo, 11 fire speed. No shield for these guys. Also not much armor, but pretty good evasion. Terrible in melee. 8 points of base, 3 points of armor piercing. Pretty much once they're in melee, they're probably going to be dead. But very high range damage, so not a bad unit to have. Both of these will be available in limited quantity depending on when you pass on your inheritance. So enjoy the few that you do get. Then we move on to Yuan Shao's units. So these are unique to Yuan Shao. And once again, like Cao Cao, he gets 5. And we'll start off with Li Yang's Daring Infantry. So the backstory for these units, I think is a little hazy. I think they confused 2 units. So Yuan Shao had these Xiandeng Sishi, which would be daring units, basically troops that were prisoners on death row, and they would get a chance to go fight on the front lines. If they come back, they're pardoned. So that's why they're the daring units. Except for those units did not come from Li Yang. The units that ended up coming from Li Yang are the ones that served Yuan Tan, and they played a role later on when Cao Cao was attacking Li Yang, later after Yuan Shao's defeat and death. So I think they hybrided those 2 units, and we ended up with this unit here. And they're called Daring Infantry here because although they're pretty weak in terms of armor, they have very good evasion, by the way. Very high charge and, purple melee infantry. No shield, and they have this ability called Do or Die. And when you activate it, 60-second buff, 25% speed, 25% charge speed, 25% melee damage base, 25% melee damage armor piercing, and 25% melee charge bonus, which will boost everything quite a bit, especially melee charge bonus and speed. They're a pretty fast unit. So you're looking at a 60 speed infantry, which is coming close to some of the heavy cavalry, because some heavy cavalry are like 68 speed. So you have a very fast moving infantry with good charge and good damage after the charge, good evasion to last in the battle. They're obviously weak against enemy archers. So that's going to be how you take these guys down, but they do have a role to play in army if you do want to use them. Obviously a light infantry for you to use early on, not going to be super pricey. Then moving on, we have the Ye Vanguard Spearmen. So previously he had 2 units, Defender of Hebei, and I forgot what the other one's called, but the idea is they use the term Hebei as the location. And Hebei would be the province name, the modern day province name. It means north of the river, right? So north of the Yellow River here. Ye would be the key city, the capital of Yuan Shao's holding, and these troops are from that city. And they're the Vanguard Spearmen. Good all-around units, so these are your premium units. And if you look at their stat, indeed they are very premium. They are crossbow hybrids. So I think these are actually more historically close to what 先登死士 would be armed as, because the crossbow plus spear plus shield combo is typically what the Han armies use to fight cavalry, especially Xiongnu cavalry. This is how you beat Xiongnu cavalry, with crossbow, spear, and shield. And this type of unit is what Yuan Shao used to wipe out Gongsun Zan historically. And they're gonna do wonders for you. They have very short range with their crossbow, 160, but extremely high damage. 67 armor piercing, insane damage. So the idea here, I think, is you get about 2 shots off and then you switch into melee and you either charge or brace, because you can do both. Even though you're a spear unit, 103 charge, which is very good. The damage is still in line with what you see with the one-handed spear and the shield. 55% from the shield, and you get decent amount of armor, decent amount of evasion combined with the shield stat. So I think the idea here is you do, in fact, want to use these guys on offense. You want to shoot your crossbow out, and then you want to charge them in if the enemy is not approaching you. And if they are charging you, just get as many shots as you can, and then just charge up close into the enemy. Unless they're cavalry, then brace. Brace first, then fight back. And I think they're a pretty strong unit right here. Then moving behind them, we have the crossbow variant of the Ye Vanguard. So their main weapon here is the crossbow, and I think their secondary weapon is a sword, which is why their damage is more evenly distributed here. Still pretty good charge, especially considering they're considered a blue unit first. They have the mixed missile formation similar to what Chen Royal Guards would have. So technically you do gain charge negation against mounted, so they can be on the front line, thus Vanguard unit. Their damage is not as high as what we saw with the spear variant, but you have better range, 220. So that difference is pretty huge, and the damage here is not low. 23 and 50 is great damage, so I still think you would take this. And they're decent in melee, still 55% range block chance, a decent amount of armor, decent amount of evasion, and damage is alright, especially considering the higher attack speed. Then after these 3 infantry, we have 2 different cavalry variants. So first let's talk about the other alternate version of the northern mounted raiders. In this case, Cao Cao's are called archers, these are called raiders. The main difference is they use a ji instead of a spear, and the reflection here would be they double the charge of the spear, because the spear and shield, right, one-handed spear and shield, even though we didn't see the shield, they're two-handed ji, so they become shock cavalries when they charge, thus they have 206, but they're mainly a blue unit. Therefore, they have decent range damage, 31 and 10. Their archer unit, very fast attack speed, 200 range. A lot slower compared to Cao Cao's unit, right? 94. Part of that reason has to do with the mobility skill on Cao Pi. But even if we take away 25% here, which we lose about 20 points, yeah, I guess we get close. I think they're probably the same. This is mainly due to mobility skill, so I wouldn't say they're faster, more mobile units. I think they're designed to be clones, except for the weapon choice. Basically, they lose out on the shield, so they don't get the 45% range block chance, but they make up for it by doubling the melee charge and have different damage profile, as in they have a little bit more base. I would prefer these over the other units because I don't think you care about having that extra 45%. It's not like you're going to run them into archers anyways, especially since Cao Cao already has Tiger Cubs to tank up enemy range as one of these new units being added in. But overall, same style of unit, very, very cool. And then we have the Xiongnu Noble Cavalry. So because Yuan Shao's forces are way in the north, they have close ties with the Xiongnu tribe, especially the southern Xiongnu tribes. So he actually have access to all the Xiongnu cavalry in the game. But this is a new one, the Xiongnu Noble Cavalry. So once again, melee cav, but very, very high charge, 220. Good speed for how much armor they're wearing, and they have the 65% range block chance, which can be boosted farther because they are melee cavalry, and they also have the 50% resistant to missile. So probably one of the tankiest melee cavalry units in the game. Maybe the best, not sure, but very good unit. 220 charge, that's the outstanding part. Damage is alright, pretty in line with sword units. 65% range block chance, reason why we love melee cavalries. And pretty much the only thing that will counter them is braced spears, and that's what they're weak against. So these are the unique units for Yuan Shao's faction. And now we can take a look at the fabled Northern Army, which you can only recruit if you have the 5 colonels. So you unlock the colonels when your faction leader, whether you're playing Yuan Shao's faction or Cao Cao's faction, reach the king rank. So once you rank up, you get access to them. And if we take a look at the units, they come in pairs. There is a heavy and a light variant for each, or veteran and regular. So let's start here with the Saber Infantry. So we're not going to spend too much time on them. You're probably not going to see them in your game. They are pretty good, I would say. They have access to a lot of interesting formations, especially the veteran version. So here we have the regular, as a melee infantry, you have decent amount of charge, fast hitting attack speed, most damage on melee base because they use a sword, a little wimpy shield at 55, but you do have access to shield wall, so that goes up all the way to 90%. Pretty good. Upgraded version, the veteran Saber Infantry. So visually already, much better armor, but stat-wise, not that big a difference, right? 13%, I mean, it matches, you did put on more armor, so that's good. They use the exact same sword, so damage is the same, charge is a little bit better, the shield is better visually and in terms of stats, so now we can hit that 100%, which we don't want to hit, but the good thing is, as a purple unit, turtle, which makes them really, really good, because now you're protected from missile 360 degrees, you can march them in to take towers, you can use them to tank towers when you want to siege, so they become a very powerful unit in that regard, and that's kind of their main selling point, I think, in the army. Then moving on, we have the D units. These are the light version, or the non-veteran version. Damage, I think it's high for spear units. Attack speed's a little bit low in my opinion, but the damage figure is good. Matches with a lot of two-handed Z, so it's consistent there. And they get 32% armor, same as the other light variant. Not so much melee evasion because they're not a purple unit, mainly going to use them against enemy cavalry. Not the best unit to recruit because no shield. And then their upgraded version, which are a little bit down the line here, better armor, 53%. So that's why I said that one's not so much of an increase, whereas this one's a much bigger increase. These are actually considered, heavy units. And not much charge. They're just sturdy front line against enemy cavalry. Not great against enemy archers, but because you have 53% armor, perhaps they will survive for a little bit on the front line. And then we have the shielded variant. So here we have the spear guards, the northern spear guards. They're gonna be very similar to regular spear guards, except for they're not gonna have total formation, which makes them worse actually. But we do have a veteran version, which have a better shield, which you can see by the 10% difference again. The same armor upgrade that you saw with the sword variant, saber variant, and of course turtle is the main thing for these units here. So basically very similar ideas of the upgrades. And then for the cavalry, also very similar with, you have a standard shot cavalry, pretty good charge, very fast. Has to do with which general we put them on, so I'm thinking they're all around 75 base, and low armor, but low armor for them is 32, which is pretty standard for all the Northern Army. Usual troops play 20%, 25%, so they would still be higher. Same damage profile as the two-handed G. And then we have the heavy variant, so this would be higher charge, same weapon, much more armor, slower. They're on the same general, so the speed is definitely slower here. Then we have a melee cavalry version. Pretty good charge for melee cavalry, in my opinion. It's very similar to what we saw with the Tiger Cubs. I think it's better than the Saber Militia and Saber Cavalry. And then 32 armor, which is standard for Northern Army, 65% standard for melee calves. Once again, pretty fast, considering the mobility skill on it. Damage, not so high, your sword unit damage. And then they have a heavy variant, which is in the middle here. The armor upgrade's not as much as the heavy D infantry that we saw, and also not as much as the heavy shock cavalry, right? It went from 32 to 53, 32 to 45. That's the two different upgrade that we have seen so far. So it's pretty consistent with the design. And over here we have, you know, decent charge, not super high, not super strong damage. You're still going to use them as damage sponge, I believe. So I feel like maybe don't splurge on these. They will do just fine if you want to have your Northern Army play that role. But most likely you're looking for, you know, this heavy shock cavalry, really good. This unit, really good. This unit, really good. And that's kind of what you want in your Northern Army. And that's going to be all the new unit brought to us in this DLC. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this deep dive. This went on for a lot longer than anticipated, but I think I covered everything that you need to know for this upcoming DLC. So thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys in the faction previews in the coming days. So until then, bye!